Hey everybody, it's me, Ken Heckenlively, with Twice as Lively. This is episode 30. Now, you may know that it is alleged that if you do something for 28 days in a row, it is likely that that will become a habit. So I point out that this is episode 30, so I'm getting in the habit of doing a daily broadcast. And I had thought to myself that when I got to episode 30, I would have attained some skills in public speaking, and then I would make a very conscious effort to engage in more controversial subjects. And I am on schedule because episode 30, the Million Man Date plan to save America, is going to be scorching hot. But before we get to the broadcast, which I'm sure will get me into a lot of trouble, we want to take our simultaneous sip, as Scott Adams told us. So please have your beverage of choice. As it is only 10:15 on the West Coast, I am assuming that for most of the world, this is the morning. So your beverage of choice will hopefully be non-alcoholic, but no judgments if you choose to make it alcoholic. So get ready, get your beverage of choice ready, and we will engage in that simultaneous sip. So good. Yes, that caffeine hits the brain, makes me talk a little bit faster, and hopefully leads to a much more interesting show. So let's talk about the Million Man Date plan to save America. What is the Million Man Date plan to save America? Well, this seeks to address the problem of the very concerning sex deficit among young Americans. Yes, that's right. The sex deficit among young Americans. Now, you should know that this perspective is neither left nor right, but is based on science and my observations of what is going on in the world. So, as always, we like to use data to base our discussions. So I'm going to read from a couple articles which have made me consider this problem of the sex deficit among young people. So notice, I am not being a Puritan by saying young people should not have sex. I'm also not being a libertine by saying that you should have sex with as many people as you want. What I am arguing for is a rational view of sexuality for young people who are dealing with a world which is not quite tuned to human biology. That's right. It's wonderful that we've made such advances, but we are also confronting biology. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is this article from the Daily Caller, which reads, "Poll shows liberal women are on crash course with the dating hell they created," from September 25th, 2025. So let's read from it. And it says, "Is there a glimmer of hope for bitter single liberal women? A new study from the Institute for Governance and Civics at Florida State University showed that yes, there might be hope yet for single liberals who hate conservatives so much that they would never be willing to date one. So let's first discuss the problem. What is the problem with young women and young men today? So I thought that this was very interesting. And I call this section Convicts Over Conservatives. And it says, one particularly striking pattern emerges among very liberal female respondents. They are significantly more willing to engage with ex-felons than political opponents on average, especially when it comes to more intimate contexts. So what does that mean? So it means that young women today are so brainwashed that they would much rather consider an intimate relationship with an ex-felon than a non-felon conservative. This bodes very poorly for the future of the human race, because I would submit to you that a young male conservative is a better potential life partner than most ex-felons. Nothing against ex-felons. I'm just playing the odds here. You, young women, you should do the same. Let's go to our next piece of information. And it is from NBC News. So if you're wondering whether I take things just from the conservative side of the aisle, I do not. Because I think if we want to get to the truth, so this article is young men and women are taking the gender gap to staggering new levels. So let's go over some of the data. I am interested in data. Young men and women different today. Well, let's first look at Trump job approval. So 45% of young males approve of Trump's policies and his work as and 24% of females. So that is a huge difference. That's a 21% gap. What that means is that there are approximately only 1/4 of women who are willing to consider that Trump. Let's talk about another figure, Elon Musk. So what we have is that Gen Z men, 43% view Musk as doing a good job, while only 20% consider that Musk is doing a good job. So that is a very stark difference between men and women. And let's see about political identification. So 53% of women consider themselves to be Democrats, and only 35% of young men. Now, what about for Republicans? Only 38% of young males consider themselves to be Republicans, while only 20% of women consider themselves to be Republican. And so let's talk about patriotism. Around a third of young men say they are extremely proud to be Americans. It's 37%. Well, only 22% of young women say they're proud to be American. Let's look at opinions on DEI. 85% of women believe that DEI programs are helpful. Only 6% of men consider it to be helpful. What about the question of whether there are two genders? 69% of males suggest that there are only two genders, male and female, while only 51% of females believe that. So we can see very stark differences between young men and women. Now, this is not to be unexpected. As Jordan Peterson has so once commented, men and women are different. How are they different? They are different in that women are much more agreeable than men. Why is that? It's probably part of the mothering instinct, the fact that women tend to be smaller than men and they are much more attuned to dangers and threats than men are. That means that by and large, women will probably be the first to point out problems, but there will also probably be a large number of false positives. Okay, so this is not unprecedented in our history. What is unprecedented in our history is this intolerance from the left about dating across the political divide. This is something which is new. And I would submit to you that this is causing a great deal of unhappiness. I believe that men need to engage with women to open up various parts of their personality, which they do not possess naturally. And women need to engage with men to access parts of their personality, which are not fully developed. So here is the Heckenlively Million Man Date Plan to Save America. There is an exceptional problem with a sex deficit among young people. Men, you need to step up. Here's what you need to do. Just as your grandfathers braved Nazi fire in World War II and the Japanese Empire, you need to do something very dangerous. What you need to do is you need to actively seek out liberal women with them. I know you are terrified at the idea of being stuck on a date with a liberal woman. But just as your grandparents, your grandfathers fought fascism, you must engage in fighting this new faction. So let me say that again. The Heckenlively plan to fight this creeping liberal fascism is as follows. I am encouraging the young men of America to go and seek out liberal women to date. I call this the Million Man Date Plan. You must save these liberal women from the hell that they have put themselves in. Because one of the things that you should know is that women tend to worry more than men. I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's a fact. As a man who's been married for 31 years, what is the single thing that I know will lower a woman's stress? Yes, I think you know what I'm talking about. And what you need to be thinking about is these young women are in pain. They are suffering. You can help ease their suffering by going on a date with them. You can ease their suffering by showing them that their fear of conservative men is irrational. So, young women who may be suffering under liberal delusions, let me tell you what you are going to gain from this new approach. You may not realize it, but conservative men are the kind of men you want to date. Why do you want to date them? You want to date them because they are more religious than previous generations of men. One of the interesting findings from these polls has been that young women will rank as their number one issue abortion, 16%, and only about 4% of young men rank abortion as their number one issue. Why is it that abortion ranks so low on male worries? It's because these young men are responsible. If they start getting involved with you, they are not looking to run. They are looking to have actual relationships with you so that if you do get pregnant, they're not going to cut and run. Young women should look at these figures and say, these are the kind of responsible young men I want to date, because it is unfortunate that women will bear the greater brunt of bearing a child. So women need to be choosy. Okay, what the liberals have done to young women is they have convinced young women that men are so terrifying that unless they fit into this narrow little wimpy box, you shouldn't date them. No, what you want is a strong man who is going to stand up to the inevitable storms of life. You do not understand how undervalued you have made young conservative men. Conservative men are the type of men that you women want to date. You want to date them because they will stand up for you. It's not like the 1960s with a love-in where everybody is wanting free love. Young conservative men understand that love comes with responsibilities. And what you're seeing among young conservative men is that they are willing to stand by you if you stand by them. So, young liberal women are experiencing depression and mental illness at unexpectedly high rates, dramatically higher rates than women of previous generations. That's because these women are engaging in a lifestyle which is not making them happy. What the horrible people have done is they have told women to worry about things which they can have no effect on. You can have no effect on what's going on around the world. I'm sorry, your powers are extremely limited. What you can do is build a good life around you. You can do that by engaging with men who are responsible. Conservative men, by and large, are highly responsible. So, men, what you need to do, you need to actively seek out liberal women. You need to ask them out on dates. And I know that you are worried about the inevitable attacks which might come from these women. And I am here to give you the proper ammunition for when you go on those dates. So, men, once you get that liberal woman on a date, here is something I would like you to say within probably the first 10 minutes of having coffee or dinner or that conversation or that walk. I want you to actively say, you know, my vote is up for grabs. I just need a good, rational argument as to why I should vote Democratic or liberal. And this is going to confuse the woman because she thinks it's self evident. And if she starts engaging in the, oh, can't you see it? Just say, actually, no, I can't. but I'm open to it. Say something like this: I'm willing to do the work, but you have to do the work of explaining it to me because my vote is up for grabs. Then wait for her try to explain it. I encourage you, men, do not interrupt the woman because she's probably likely to talk for 15 to 30 minutes, laying out everything she thinks. And your job is to simply sit back and listen to it. After she has exhausted herself from speaking, then you start asking your questions. And you will show her that you are listening to all her points, but you are pointing out some of the errors of fact or logic that she has. This is going to make you uh, rise in her eyes because here's what she's expecting. She's expecting that you're going to give a lot of slogans. And in fact, I have to say that I have seen young men falling back on these slogans. What we're not talking about is a return to the 1950s era of expectations. This is a new world. Women are going to be going into the workplace. And from my experience of 63 years, I have noticed that women who have their own independent career are happier than women who don't. Now, there is a certain period of time in which most women will want to focus on the raising of their children. And I think that's good. And I think that society needs to make space for that. And uh, and even if there are women who I think will probably be about 20 to 25% of the population who may want to have careers in the way that men do, and there can be an arrangement with a proper man. But there is something to be said for flexibility and to be open to having conversations with people. Uh, as I've talked about my own journey in politics, there have been times when I have felt the conservatives have gone too far into religion. And I have felt, as I did during the Clinton years, that Bill Clinton presented a better example of what it meant to be in politics than the Republicans did. So it is important that you be genuine. But I am calling on 1 million young men to commit to dating liberal women. Yes, you do need to have your that within the first half hour of sitting down with a liberal woman, she will choose to attack you several times, but you must remain calm under fire. I am telling you that if you remain calm under fire, there will be a change in this woman. And you don't get flustered by what she has to say. In fact, if she attacks you, your response is, no, I really want to listen to you. I want to consider what you learn here. You must mean it. My sense, though, is that she has been fed a lot of slogans that she is repeating nonsensically. But if you give her the time, because I think that's the way women solve things, they solve things by talking them out. For many men, this can be a little disconcerting because you want to jump in and fix things. So, but you're interfering with the female thought process. The female thought process is talking it out. That means you must remain quiet during that process of her thinking it out. So, does the data also show that some young women are figuring this out? Yes, it seems a divide in Gen Z among younger and older women. So I present this article from Politico about the new partisan divide is old Gen Z versus young Gen Z. Sections here. So it was that's the new data out of Yale's youth poll broke the internet last week, and it revealed a partisan split within Gen Z. Given a generic Democrat versus Republican 6, respondents ages 18 to 21 supported Republicans by nearly 12 points, while those ages 22 to 29 backed Democrats by about 6 points. It was a stunning gap that undermined the longstanding notion of young trending more liberal. On the contrary, today's youngest eligible voters are more conservative than their older counterparts. According to the poll, they are less likely to support transgender athletes participating in sports, less likely to support sending aid to Ukraine, and more likely to approve of President Donald Trump. 51% of younger Gen Zers view him favorably, compared to 40% of older Gen Z. Now, I do have to say that from my time as a California public school science teacher, I've seen this change among my students, and particularly with the COVID narrative. And so I thought that there was a really interesting argument that they had made here about why they felt that young people were tending to be more conservative. And it's basically this. Whenever you are engaged in education, there are what the teachers want to teach and what the students learn. Now, it is just inherent in any situation like that, that when one person is trying to prove their point, the person who is listening to it is thinking about the opposite point. And so I thought this part of the article from Politico was really interesting. And it shows how I believe COVID is going to have a lasting impact on people. And so the author writes, in my own research, I started to hear about COVID's impact in conversations with young Americans in 2022. Throughout history, young people haven't liked being told what to do. And for many young Gen Zers, the pandemic restrictions chafed against their. First, they expressed annoyance with what they saw as prolonged social distancing on campuses that impacted the student experience. As one 20-year-old told me in a listening session at the end of March, the adults don't have it all together and they don't have my back. When students finally went back to school, they complained about the policing of their behavior, not just regarding COVID protections like social distancing and masking, but also broader issues around language. Our national online discourse, these young people said, had adopted an overt political correctness and cancel culture. The tendency, particularly in online spaces, to denounce others for controversial statements or action. Many young people perceived this as promoted by Democrats, those in control, not just in DC, but in pop culture and on social media. So this is my final point, which is that young people have a healthy distrust of authority. So just because the liberals have taken over in academia, media, and culture does not mean that is the lesson which is being given to. What it means is you are going to have this divide, which we have seen, which is because young women are more agreeable than young men. It will be the young women who take this poison into their systems. It is up to the young men to give the antidote. The antidote to liberal philosophy, which causes a divide between the sexes, is for men to make the move to aggressively date liberal women and to push them off of the path of their own destruction. This is the only path forward for humanity. So, young men, now is the time to step up, just as your grandfathers did in World War II. And yes, I know you don't want to feel like you are under attack on a date. I'm sorry. You just have to put up with that. But I have given you the tools to combat that liberal lunacy and rescue these poor liberal by the media. So, young men of America, you have your mission. You are to go on 1,000,000 dates with liberal women and save their lives. That's Ken Heckenlively. To show. Have a great day, America.